Good afternoon, YouTube. Today I'm making this video. Pierre Poilievre actually is responsible for putting out this video from Senator Leo, forgive me for the pronunciation, Housakos, who is addressing Bill Morneau about the terrible state of affairs and the incompetence by the health minister and many other individuals that left Canadians vulnerable during coronavirus, COVID-19. So I thought that we'd get into it. I'll just play the video, and I would like this to be part of my own personal archive, just so that in case it gets deleted, I can keep it. Thank you for watching.
Minister, this week we've seen several damning media reports outlining several failures to get a handle on this pandemic over the crucial early stages of the process. Your government continually defers to the experts and defending those early failures, but ultimately the decisions and responsibilities for those decisions always rest with Cabinet. I'm concerned about your government's reliance solely on Public Health Agency and not on the expertise of our Military Medical Intelligence Unit, who sounded the alarm way back in January. This unit relies on information not only from the World Health Organization, but also on intelligence shared amongst our Five Eye allies, including the US, whose intelligence was warning of this outbreak as far back as November 2019. So my question, Minister, to you is, why did we rely on a body that appears only to be parroting the World Health Organization and information coming from Communist China, and not on our military intelligence unit that was certainly providing a different picture if the Cabinet was willing to listen a few months ago?
Well, thank you for the question. I can assure you that we have and will continue to consider all the sources of information that we have, and that will form our response. In our estimation, we need to continue to consider the science and the medical expertise here, and also look towards the examples of other countries and how they're dealing with this challenge, some of whom are ahead of us in the sense that they've already experienced a worse challenge, and we can get some value in considering what's worked and what's not worked. So we will consider all those sources of information, have done so, and I think it's important to do so.
Well, Minister, again, we had intelligence information back in November and January that highlighted the danger of this and had an urgency underlined in their evaluation of things, where our health officials were saying back in January and February, certainly we shouldn't overreact and we shouldn't worry. So I think the Cabinet has to really look at why some of that intelligence information didn't get to the top and didn't get a fair hearing. Last time you and your colleagues were here, Minister, I cited a 2006 report, which was prophetic in its warning about what we're seeing right now as far as lack of preparedness for equipment in this pandemic. The report recommended a federal stockpile, the one I asked Minister Haydu about, and she refused to answer last time you guys were here. She has since acknowledged, Minister, that the stockpile wasn't maintained, and I'm concerned with what your government is doing now to ensure that gross negligence is rectified, not only for the next pandemic, but for the current one. So my question, in addition to the tons of money, which understandably we're putting out there for federal assistance to Canadians, have you entered into contractual discussions with manufacturers, not only to fulfill the current backlog need, but looking at setting up stockpiles in the future if there's a second wave or a third wave or another pandemic in the future, so we're better prepared?
Well, I'd like to start by rejecting the premise of your question. We do and will continue to consider all sources of information as we come up with our plans. We will need to consider the situation that we're in and the preparedness that we have as we consider next steps. To your specific question about whether we are in the midst of contracting with organizations to provide the appropriate personal protective gear, the answer is yes. To the extent that your question is asking about things like ventilators, the answer is yes. We are in the midst of ensuring that we procure the appropriate resources for our country now, and looking towards having a secure source of supply on an ongoing basis.
So you notice there, all of Morneau's answers are non-committal. Everything that he's saying is vague, doesn't directly answer any questions. He says something like, I reject the premise of your question, Why would he reject the premise of a question that is very logically put together? They did have the information from other sources other than the WHO and ignored it, right? THERESA Tam had that information and ignored it. And it's absolutely reprehensible that these heartless individuals in government don't even have the decency in themselves to admit that they made a mistake, deliberately made a mistake, and put Canadian lives in danger as a result. Now, the fact that these kind of questions always really deeply anger me, because I look across into the US and I look at Trump, and Trump is doing pressers every day. Like, it's maddening when I look at the amount of effort that president actually goes to addressing the public, and meetings with companies and meetings with common people, and you name it. This guy it's like he doesn't sleep, and he's constantly trying to help everyone. You have a problem, okay, come and let's try to solve it. These guys are like the antithesis of that. When you have a problem, they'll give you the vague solution to the problem that they themselves created, which is not a solution, but probably something like they're going to borrow money and throw money at a problem, and that's how they'll solve it. They're not going to consult anybody outside of their own experts, let's say. They won't confide in anybody else's opinion outside of government. It's what I'm trying to get at is that it's extremely narrow-minded. It's closed-door politics, and power sits in the hands of very, very few incompetent individuals, I would say. And like the last question that they answer, I really liked it, because this senator this conservative senator that came out was great, and he was pushing about the budget at the end. We'll get to that. But what he was really trying to get Morneau to admit is that you were wrong about how you handled this thing publicly and how you informed Canadians. You were wrong. Tam was wrong in every way, parroting the WHO, and still they don't have the decency of character to admit that they colossally screwed up with Canadians. And you never know. The death toll can still go higher than what it is now. I keep hearing recovery this, recovery that. We're not in recovery. We are not at that stage until we have an antivirus synthesized. And, I don't care what anybody says. I mean, Trump is very optimistic, and they're going on about it. But, I mean, we don't have a cure. So, to me, this thing is still out of control. So when I look at the situation with Morneau, this is the perfect example of like a socialist dictatorship. Like they are required to be here at this hearing or this committee, pardon me, and meet and talk to you, but they will never, ever answer you with the truth in anything. All their answers are pre-written, and you can come at them with a very logically well-constructed question, but like the nihilists, none of that matters. Or maybe not the nihilists. How would I classify it? I guess the radical left, since I have no other alternative, where logic and evidence, proof, doesn't mean anything in an argument or in a debate or a discussion. None of it. What they think is the right thing to do, that's what they'll do, no matter what evidence, how much evidence to the contrary is presented at their feet. And they are the most despicable people, because they should be held to account legally within the system, but they corrupt it by paying off judges or whatever they have. Like, you look at all of the crimes this Liberal government has committed, and they're not held to account for any of it. Nothing. So, forgive me for saying so, Morneau, but something is rotten in the state of Denmark. You know what I mean? You've heard that expression. It means corrupted to the core. That's what it means. This Canadian system is completely out of control. And I blame the opposition party mostly because if Preston Manning had been around, this would have got a lot more publicity. They would have been fighting. Scheer is not only lazy and incompetent, but that they don't do anything. He doesn't come in front of the press every day and condemn. No, they're just very quiet. It just, it could be the media is not reporting on it, but still, like, I never, ever, ever see the Conservative Party standing up and fighting this government for Canada. And they just aren't. So I'll let it conclude.
My last question, Minister, has to do specifically with finances and directly involves the decisions you've made over the last 4 years. Your government decided to have deficit management funding approach to the last 4 years of our fiscal policy. Do you regret the fact that over the last 4 years you ran up deficits during a relatively decent economic time? And now that we're in the midst of a real huge crisis, do you regret not having that $70 billion available to you in order to substantiate even further the aid you're putting out to Canadians?
Exactly so.
First, I think it's important to consider the premise of your question.
Yeah, the premise of your question again.
We found ourselves at the beginning of this challenge in a very strong fiscal
deficit.
position. So what you've seen during the course of the last four and a half years while we've been in office, we've reduced the amount of our debt as a function of our gross domestic product. And we think that that's appropriate. So that puts us in a position where we have the capacity to fund ourselves through this challenge.
Minister,
we will continue to take that approach, of course, when we're not in a crisis period.
I'm sorry. We have to move to another question.
There you go. See? So as I said, he's good at filling the air with words that doesn't mean anything. With respect to his idea, let's just quickly recycle through what Trudeau's been doing. Let's see here. Just off the top of my head, Trudeau gives $700 million for global abortion. Let's see. Trudeau gives $50 million to MasterCard. Trudeau gives $10.5 million to Omar Carter. And what was the other one? Loblaws. I forgot about that one. $12 million to Loblaws, $40 million to BlackBerry, and yada to a bunch of useless. It's to me, he's like Obama. Under his reign, Trudeau, I'm talking about now, the country suffered massive debt, complete dissolution of its national identity, paying off. Crippling businesses and paying taxpayer money into radicalized foreign governments. And essentially that whole globalist perspective that we're all familiar with, but none of us are. Well, I assume there's a small minority of us that are actually paying attention to this train wreck. But I just wanted to point it out that, like, Morneau, again, deliberately talks around the question, and truth means next to nothing to these people. Thank you so much for your time and attention. See you in the next one. Bye-bye.